It all started a few years back when I, Alex, a 32-year-old professional pastry chef, was running my own small bakery in the heart of Chicago. My business was doing well, and I had built a solid reputation in the local community for my exquisite cakes and pastries. Most of my regular customers were familiar faces from the neighborhood, but I also had a growing clientele from the nearby suburbs, who would make the trip just to get their hands on my signature creations. Life was good, and I was content with the way things were going. That is, until one fateful day when my older brother, Marcus, reached out to me with an unusual request. Marcus and I had always been close growing up, but ever since he moved to Los Angeles to pursue his acting career, our relationship had become somewhat strained. We still kept in touch, but there was an undeniable distance between us. Marcus was getting married to his longtime girlfriend, Sophie, and he wanted me to bake their wedding cake. At first, I was thrilled by the idea of being a part of such an important event in my brother's life. However, as the details started to unfold, I realized that this was going to be no ordinary cake order. "Alex, you have to make this the most extravagant and over-the-top cake anyone has ever seen," Marcus insisted over the phone. "Sophie's family is loaded, and they expect nothing but the best. This cake needs to be a showstopper, something that will make everyone's jaws drop." I tried to reason with him, explaining that a cake of that magnitude would require a substantial amount of time and resources, not to mention a hefty price tag. But Marcus was adamant. He promised to pay whatever it took, and he even offered to fly me out to Los Angeles to oversee the final preparations. Against my better judgment, I agreed to take on the challenge, convincing myself that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to showcase my skills on a grand scale. Little did I know, this decision would set off a chain of events that would test my resilience and relationships like never before. Over the next few weeks, I poured my heart and soul into designing the most elaborate, multi-tiered masterpiece I had ever attempted. Each layer was meticulously crafted, with intricate sugar work, fondant sculptures, and delicate pipe details that would make even the most seasoned pastry chefs envious. As the wedding date drew closer, I found myself working around the clock, barely sleeping or eating, just to ensure that every aspect of the cake was perfect. My small team of assistants at the bakery was pushed to their limits, but we were all determined to make Marcus and Sophie's dream a reality. Finally, the big day arrived, and I traveled to Los Angeles with the disassembled cake components, ready for the final assembly and decoration on site. The wedding venue was a lavish, sprawling estate nestled in the Hollywood Hills, and the guest list read like a who's who of the entertainment industry. As I was putting the finishing touches on the towering, six-tier masterpiece, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. This cake was a true testament to my skills and dedication, and I couldn't wait for Marcus and Sophie to see it. However, when they finally did lay eyes on the cake, their reactions were not what I had expected. Instead of being awestruck and grateful, they both wore expressions of disappointment and disdain. "Is this some kind of joke?" Sophie snapped, glaring at me with utter contempt. "This looks nothing like what we discussed. I specifically asked for a minimalist, modern design, and this is just a gaudy, over-the-top monstrosity." My heart sank as I realized there had been a colossal miscommunication somewhere along the line. Marcus, who had been so enthusiastic about my grand vision, now looked just as appalled as his bride-to-be. "Alex, what were you thinking?" he exclaimed, running his fingers through his perfectly coiffed hair. "This is a disaster. How could you mess up something so important?" I stood there in disbelief, utterly speechless. All the late nights, the painstaking effort, the sacrifices I had made to create this towering confection, it had all been for naught. In their eyes, my labor of love was nothing more than a garish embarrassment. "I don't understand," I stammered, my hands trembling as I struggled to comprehend the situation. "Marcus, you specifically asked for an extravagant, jaw-dropping cake. You wanted something that would leave a lasting impression." Marcus shook his head vehemently, his face flushed with anger. "That's not what I meant at all. I wanted something elegant and classy, something that would complement the sophisticated ambience of the wedding, not this monstrosity." Sophie chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. "Honestly, Alex, I expected better from you. This cake is a tacky eyesore. It's going to be the laughingstock of the entire event." My heart sank deeper with every cutting remark. I had put so much of myself into this creation, and now it was being mercilessly torn apart by the very people I had hoped to impress. Desperate to salvage the situation, I tried to reason with him. Look, there must have been some miscommunication somewhere along the line. If you had been clearer with your vision, I could have adjusted my approach accordingly. But Marcus was having none of it. Don't try to pin this on us, Alex. You're the professional here. You should have known better than to create something so garish and over the top. The word stung like 1,000 needles, and I could feel the resentment building within me. After all the hard work and sacrifices I had made, to be treated with such disrespect and ingratitude was almost too much to bear. Before I could stop myself, the words came tumbling out. You know what, Marcus? Maybe if you hadn't been so wrapped up in your glamorous Hollywood life, you would have taken the time to communicate your vision properly. But I guess that's too much to ask from a self-absorbed, fame-obsessed jerk like you. The stunned silence that followed was deafening. Marcus and Sophie stared at me in utter shock, while the wedding guests who had gathered nearby looked on, with a mixture of horror and fascination. It was in that moment that I realized I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The damage was done, and there was no going back. The tension in the air was palpable as Marcus and I engaged in a heated back and forth, our voices escalating with every exchange. Years of resentment and unspoken grievances came pouring out, fueled by the humiliation and disappointment of the botched cake fiasco. You've always been jealous of my success, haven't you? Marcus spat, his eyes narrowing. You couldn't stand the fact that I made something of myself, while you were content to stay stuck in that dingy little bakery of yours. His words cut deep, striking at the insecurities I had long harbored about my life choices. Had I settled for too little? Was I merely living in the shadow of my brother's accomplishments? At least I have integrity, I shot back, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. I've built something real, something tangible, with my own 2 hands. What have you done, Marcus? You're nothing but a pretty face, a glorified puppet dancing for the Hollywood elite. Sophie stepped forward, her face contorted with anger. How dare you speak to him like that? You're just a bitter, jealous failure who can't handle the fact that your brother has achieved more in his life than you ever will. Her words stung like a slap across the face, and in that moment, something inside me snapped. All the frustration, the resentment, the years of feeling like a second-class citizen in my own family, it all came bubbling to the surface in an explosive outburst. You want to know the truth? I yelled, my voice echoing through the cavernous wedding venue. The real reason Marcus asked me to make this cake wasn't because he wanted to include me in his special day. It was because he knew it would give him another opportunity to belittle me, to make me feel small and insignificant compared to his high-flying life in Los Angeles. I gestured wildly towards the ornate cake, my creation now reduced to a symbol of my failure and humiliation. This cake was never about celebrating your love or your union. It was about feeding Marcus's insatiable ego, giving him another chance to lord his success over me. The guests watched in stunned silence, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. Some had even begun recording the explosive scene on their phones, no doubt eager to capture the juicy drama for posterity. Marcus's face was contorted with rage, his fists clenched at his sides. You're delusional, Alex. You've always been jealous and resentful of my achievements, and now you're lashing out like a petulant child because you can't handle the fact that you're a failure. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and in that moment, I knew there was no going back. The bond between us, already frayed and tenuous, had been irreparably severed. Years of love, shared experiences, and childhood memories, all of it had been obliterated in a tempestuous explosion of resentment and bitterness. With a heavy heart, I turned away from the wreckage of what was supposed to be a joyous celebration. As I walked out of the venue, the weight of what had transpired bore down upon me like a crushing burden. I had burned the bridge with my brother, and there was no telling if it could ever be rebuilt. As I stormed out of the venue, hot tears of rage and humiliation stung my eyes. My world had been shattered into a million pieces, and I had no idea how to pick them back up. The dream of making amends with Marcus and being part of his special day lay in ruins, crushed under the weight of our escalating resentments. Blinded by my emotions, I didn't even realize where I was going until I found myself standing outside a dingy bar on the outskirts of town. It was a seedy joint, The kind of place where lost souls went to drown their sorrows in cheap whiskey and stale regrets. Without a second thought, I pushed through the battered wooden doors and made a beeline for the bar. The acrid stench of stale beer and cigarette smoke assaulted my senses, but in that moment, it was a welcome reprieve from the pristine perfection of Marcus's lavish wedding. "Give me a double shot of your strongest stuff," I growled at the bartender, a grizzled old man with eyes that had seen too much of the world's ugliness. He eyed me warily but complied, sliding a glass of amber liquid across the scarred wooden bar. I downed it in one burning gulp, relishing the way the fiery liquor scorched my throat and momentarily numbed the ache in my chest. As the alcohol worked its way through my system, the events of the day began to replay in my mind like a twisted kaleidoscope of memories. Marcus's disdain, Sophie's cutting remarks, the look of horror on the guests' faces, it all swirled together in a toxic miasma of shame and regret. "Another," I rasped, slamming the empty glass back onto the bar. The bartender hesitated for a moment, but something in my haggard expression must have convinced him to oblige. As I nursed the second drink, I couldn't help but wonder how things had gone so horribly wrong. Marcus and I had been inseparable as kids, two peas in a pod who shared everything from clothes to secrets. We had dreamed of conquering the world together, side by side, united by an unbreakable bond of brotherhood. But somewhere along the way, that bond had frayed, eroded by jealousy, resentment, and the harsh realities of pursuing divergent paths in life. I drained the second glass, savoring the way the liquor burned its way down my throat, temporarily numbing the ache in my soul. As the amber liquid sloshed in the empty glass, I caught a glimpse of my reflection, a man I hardly recognized. Haggard and haunted by the ghosts of what could have been, it was then that a familiar voice jolted me out of my spiraling thoughts. "Well, well, if it isn't my dear brother, drowning his sorrows in the bottom of a glass." I whipped around to find Marcus standing behind me, a sardonic smirk playing on his lips. Despite his impeccable tuxedo and coiffed hair, there was a wildness in his eyes that hinted at the tumultuous emotions roiling beneath the surface. "What are you doing here?" I slurred, the alcohol already taking its toll on my senses. Marcus shrugged nonchalantly, sidling up to the bar beside me. "Let's just say the wedding reception was a bit of a dud after your little outburst." Sophie's family was mortified, and she's holed up in the bridal suite, refusing to see anyone. He signaled the bartender for a drink, never taking his eyes off me. As for me, well, I figured I'd come to find the root of all the drama and try to make sense of this whole mess. I scoffed bitterly, taking another swig from my glass. What's there to make sense of? You got exactly what you wanted. A chance to humiliate me in front of everyone, to remind me that I'll never measure up to your lofty standards. Marcus's expression darkened, and for a moment, I thought he might lash out at me physically. But instead, he let out a long, weary sigh and drained his glass in one fluid motion. "You really believe that, don't you?" he murmured, his voice heavy with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "After all these years, you still think I'm out to get you, to make you feel small and insignificant." He shook his head slowly, and when he met my gaze again, there was a flicker of something haunted in his eyes, a glimmer of vulnerability I had never seen before. "The truth is, Alex, I've always been jealous of you." Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper, but his words hit me like a ton of bricks. I blinked owlishly, certain that the alcohol had addled my senses. "Jealous of me? What are you talking about?" Marcus sighed heavily, running a hand through his meticulously styled hair. "Look at you, you built something real and tangible with your own hands. That bakery of yours, as humble as it may be, is a true labor of love. Every creation that comes out of your kitchen is a piece of your heart and soul." He paused, a rueful smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Me? I'm just a puppet, dancing for the amusement of others. Sure, I have fame and fortune, but at what cost? My life is a carefully curated facade, a series of roles to be played for the masses. But you live an authentic life, fueled by passion and integrity." I opened my mouth to protest, but Marcus held up a hand, silencing me. "All my life, I've chased after success and acclaim, thinking that would fill the void inside me. But no matter how many awards I won or movies I starred in, I always felt like a fraud, a hollow shell of a person." He drained the last of his drink, grimacing as the liquor burned its way down. And then you come along, this beacon of genuine talent and hard work, and it made me realize how vapid and meaningless my life had become. I was jealous of your ability to find fulfillment in the simple act of creation, something I had long since lost sight of in my relentless pursuit of stardom. Tears glistened in Marcus's eyes as he turned to face me fully. That's why I asked you to make the cake, not to humiliate you, but to bask in the glow of your passion and dedication, even if for a fleeting moment. But when Sophie rejected your masterpiece, it was like a knife twisting in my gut. Because in that moment, I saw the spark of your creativity being extinguished, and it reminded me of everything I had sacrificed in the name of ambition. A heavy silence hung between us, punctuated only by the dull thrum of jukebox music and clinking glasses. I struggled to process Marcus's confession, my mind reeling from the weight of his words. Finally, I found my voice, thick with emotion. Marcus, I had no idea you felt that way. All these years, I thought you looked down on me, that you saw my chosen path as a sign of weakness or lack of ambition. He shook his head vehemently. No, Alex. Your strength and resilience have always been an inspiration to me, even if I was too blinded by my own ego to see it. In that moment, something shifted between us, a palpable easing of tension, a bridge being rebuilt from the ashes of our fractured relationship. We might have taken divergent paths in life, but at our cores, we were still the same two kids who had dreamed of conquering the world together. As the night wore on, we swapped stories and reminisced about the good old days, laughing and crying in equal measure. It was a cathartic release, a purging of years' worth of resentment and misunderstandings. By the time the first rays of dawn peeked through the grimy bar windows, we had formed an unspoken pact to leave the past behind and embrace a new chapter in our relationship, one built on mutual respect, understanding, and unconditional support. As we stepped out into the crisp morning air, Marcus slung an arm around my shoulders, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of belonging, of being truly seen and appreciated for who I was. You know, he mused, a playful glint in his eye. Sophie's family is throwing this lavish engagement party next month. How about you come out to LA and cater the event? But this time, no grand gestures or extravagant cakes, just good, honest food from the heart. I couldn't help but chuckle, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. You've got a deal, brother. Just promise me one thing, no more misunderstandings or petty resentments. From now on, we keep it real. Marcus grinned, pulling me into a fierce embrace. Wouldn't have it any other way.